been working with, especially in this last year and even before that, but particularly this last couple of years, and that's listening and watching the news. And in the past, that was always just an area for us to get information and the like, but now it's turned into a source of stress and anxiety for many people out there.
Well, welcome everybody. I think it's great to have all of you here. And I'm not in the studio. I'm actually in my office. That has become kind of a studio itself. But here's where I see people. Here's where I talk to them about their pains and sorrows and distorted thinking, and try to provide them with some guidance into what options they have to do things differently. But I like the topic today. I like the idea of talking about stress and the news. And that is particularly important right now because we have been going at a lot of uncertainty in the news. And I think that we have kind of outgrown our ability to adapt to the speed, and how deep the news are and how short the news cycles are. You know, and again, I feel like my father. I feel like an old man now that is talking about these things, and my kids make a lot of fun of me because of this. But I keep talking about the past and how the delivery of the news has evolved, right? I mean, you can get back to the tune of the 1900s to all of the 20th century, how things were managed in terms of the news. And for news to travel, even though we had some technology, we had the telegraph and the telephone, we didn't have this speed of delivery, right? So the news had to be digested, the news had to be listened to. And sometimes we like to say that there's an ulterior motive in the news, right? And the ulterior motive is for people to buy stuff. I mean, that's what it comes down to. From the beginning of time till now, is I'm going to give you something for free, which is information, but you're going to buy something from me in return. And that continues to be the same premise. It's just that nowadays things are moving so fast that you're actually not able to digest anything, right? You're being bombarded with so many sources that you end up feeling helpless, right? You end up feeling that there's nothing I can do about this. I have my phone and I have messages and I have like 20,000 alerts that tell me when, I don't know, the president smile. Okay. I mean, those kinds of things, right? So people feel stressed, and that is the problem. The problem is twofold. One is people who don't have stress problems who become stressed, and people who have difficulty dealing with stress becoming stressed.
Mm.
And those are kind of two different sides, right? But the reality is that the code word is stress, meaning something happens to you not only psychologically because of the overwhelming amount of information, but also biologically because our ability to adapt to stress is innate, is ingrained in our genetics, right? We have to be able to respond to stress because we have to protect ourselves. But when we are constantly feeling like we're being attacked and we're reacting the same way as if we're being attacked, that's problematic and that causes pretty serious consequences, both biologically and psychologically, right?
So why does one take data, which is basically is, and have such a visceral reaction or reaction that I'm being attacked with this information instead of being informed?
Well, at a very basic level, it is because we have we're provided with a lot of uncertainty. We humans are hardwired to not handle uncertainty very well. And that is because we have some basic needs. We have the need to be safe. We have the need to have food. We have the need to have water, right? So, in the most primitive way, when food and water becomes scarce, we become afraid.
Mm.
Not to say that we can be eaten by another animal that is also looking for water and food, right? So, so that basic principle remains, right? So whenever we're giving a lot of uncertainty and is expanded by the fact that we're getting a lot of information, and then worsened by the fact that we don't get news anymore. We get opinions,
Yes.
right? So now you have to become part of a cult to some degree of agreeing or not agreeing with an opinion versus processing the data into your own opinion, right? So we have become consumers of opinions, not of information, right? We don't even take the time to listen to the news and make up our own assessment based on our own experience, our own knowledge of the world, and our own needs, right? So we end up getting into the cult of opinion, and then we have to become defenders of the opinion, right?
Mhm.
So that I mean, if you follow the sequence, it becomes terribly stressful. So there's got to be a way for us to recognize, when we're falling into the cult of opinion. Because the first question really we have to ask is, how is this good for me? Right? I mean, forget, am I right or wrong? Who's right and who's wrong? What are we going to do about it? What is the motivation to change? Blah, blah, blah. We have to be able to ask ourselves as human beings of good value, how is this good for me? Right? If you're not able to answer that question, move away from this situation. Don't get yourself stuck with the trying to understand the opinion, right? Create your own,
Mhm.
study the matter, go and get more information from other sources, right?
And then
But everything
question those
is
sources as well.
exactly, so everything is so instantaneous now that we don't process, we just react, right? So we don't allow ourselves the luxury of attention. Attention used to be a need. Now it has become a luxury. Nobody pays attention to anything. you know I mean, I see it in social media a lot, TikTok and Instagram and this place and that place. They only allow you so much time, right? And the people who investigate these things, they can tell you to a millisecond, what is the attention span of the people who are looking at these things, right? It's minimal, right? It's like we just become judges of what gives us pleasure, right? But we don't allow ourselves the time to explore, right? And we need to get back to that, because what we have found, after COVID is that this has become particularly stressful to the not necessarily the baby boomers, right? Because we have lived with uncertainty for a very long time, but very stressful for Generation X and Z, and the newer generations who have become accustomed to immediate problem solving,
Mhm.
right? The whole situation has been tremendously stressful for them, and that creates a lot of problems. It creates a lot of problems for adults, and it creates a lot of problems for children.
Yeah, it seems that everything now is getting boiled down to a yes or no, or a black or white, or a this or that, instead of the reality that most issues are a little bit more complex, and there's gradations in between them, and we're being forced to choose one side or the other. It's like everything's binary. It's either zero or one, no matter what. And it seems to, because of that news cycle, like you said, we're responding, we're defending our own paradigms, instead of actually using that information to
Yes.
re-examine our opinions. So how does one manage? Again, you said there are cult of opinion. If you're only getting data from one specific source.
Well, I think, let me, before I go to the specific source, because we have opinions in basically two sides now in this country, in the United States, and in parts of the world. You know, we need to understand one very basic principle. 99% of everything you hear in any news or opinion channel, right? Whether it's TV, cable, whether it's the internet, 99% is bad news. Okay. So let's start from that premise, right? It's not like we have this balance of of goodness and badness, and that provides us with guidance into how to split things. It's always a bad news that have to be solved, right? And that, by the way, you must have an opinion about it.
Mm,
You can't say, that doesn't affect me, so I really don't get much into it, right? I'm gonna go and watch sports. I don't know. We it is like it's like a bad drug, right? You get addicted to it. And I can tell you many times my patients and people that I know told me I had to learn to turn it off
mm.
because I was getting home and the first thing I wanted to do is to listen to the bad news. That sounds kind of masochistic, right? That is like destroying yourself just based on your need to not have uncertainty and to believe in something, right? To be part of the cult of opinion.
But then also, what you're ending up believing is all the bad stuff. I hear all the time from people, our country's on the precipice of being destroyed. And I'm like, wow, I've been to some messed up parts of the world and it doesn't look like that to me. But because it seems bad, all the news they're getting, they have this opinion that everything's on the verge of complete and utter collapse.
Yes, it's interesting. I was when I get up in the morning, I start distributing work in the hospital to different people that work with me, and I was doing this, and I was listening to one of the news channels, right? But I was typing in the computer, and I was listening in the background, and then this message pops out, and the bad news was that the White House is going to miss their 4th of July deadline to vaccinate 70% of the people, right? And I started thinking, okay, so how is this news, right? How it became the responsibility of the White House to make sure that everybody gets vaccinated. I mean, I have an opinion, and I can tell you, is the responsibility of our government to provide us accessible, available, and affordable vaccinations, which is there. Well, how is the responsibility that people goes and gets a vaccine, right? So I actually got into the website of the news channel and the tweet, and I just gave my opinion, because there needs to be a counteract and a counterbalance to the idea that there is someone out there who selects what's news and what's not. I mean, in the times of the newspapers when I grew up was the editorial boards, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you have an instant editorial board that reviews everything in a second by second, right? So even the editorialization of the news has become nil. So I don't think we have newscasters anymore. We have opinion casters. So somebody had the opinion that was news. So now people who listens to those news, some people will read into it, we're in danger. You know, more than 30% of the population is not vaccinated. We're going backwards. How is that positive news?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we do have to recognize that what we're hearing has a negative tint to begin with, right? Now, the problem is that when people hear negative news, people will start worrying about other things besides the negative news because they start taking it into the general uncertainty of my life, right? And how is this going to be negative to me? And now I had to worry about other things, is the I don't know, we're going to have another mortgage crisis, the stock market is going to collapse, gasoline is going to go to 5. I mean, all kinds of stuff that there's no correlation to.
Mm-hmm.
But negative thoughts, generate, I mean, negative news generate negative thoughts, and people tend to worry more, right?
And then that driving down to a binary choice of everything. It's either for or against or with or without. Um, it seems to simplify, but really it makes you to go to one extreme or the other.
Well, you see, but the problem with the polarization of information, right, that creates a cult of opinion is that you have to become part of the cult. And now you are responsible now for transmitting the cold so you can feel that there's companion, right? That you have somebody who is like you. The problem is that there's no communication between the sides. And that I think that basically describes the state of our politics, nowadays, is that there is no there is no middle ground of understanding. It's all about who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, it's becoming a zero sum game instead of in the past. It's something that's a collaborative and cooperative, hopefully, effort in order to achieve a specific goal. It's either one side or the other, no matter what. So then, what is the I guess the solution for somebody, anybody, just general person, watching the news to find a way to watch it and feel somewhat at peace?
Well, let me tell you one other thing about the news and in the negative sense, and is that when you have negative when you have negative news, it is known that people tend to get sadder. There is more sadness in the life of people. So that's something we have to keep an eye on, especially with vulnerable people. But how we have to recognize first that we're getting irritated, that we're getting some difficulty sleeping, that we get angry with other people when we're watching the news. Somebody a long time ago defined this as the headline stress disorder, right? That
There's
you,
actually a term for it. Wow.
what is not a psychiatric term, but somebody, a psychologist, a long time ago decided to label it that. So it is very important to recognize that you're stressed and that your behavior changes. Once you recognize that, you have options, right? And the option number one, okay, is that being control of the things that you're in control of, right? A very basic concept, meaning when you feel anxious and afraid because you're engaged in a lot of negative cult opinion, you have the option of not watching the news. I mean, it sounds kind of silly.
You don't like the song, turn it off, right? As they used to say.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first you have to acknowledge, right? You have to have the knowledge of stress that is coming from a specific thing. And to understand that you don't control what they say, you don't control how they say it, you don't control their opinion, but you control your listening. And that is the biggest tool you have. The thing is, okay, so if you acknowledge it, and take a break from that, then you have to replace it with something else, right? There's got to be a process by you, because you're going to feel a sense of loss. I mean, it sounds kind of like masochistic loss, but you're losing something that is hurting you, but that you felt a need for. And we see that a lot in drug addiction, right? I mean, letting go of the drugs is a painful process, even though rationally they're bad for you. Okay, they were giving you something. So the bad news are giving you something that you're going to start letting go of, right? So you had to pull back and start educating yourself about those topics, right? So reading, this may sound kind of so backwards, doing a little bit of reading might be a good thing. Now, if you like to read on your tablet or your computer, turn off the messaging,
Mhm.
especially if you have alerts, on the computer, the phone, or your tablet that says, you know, the president smiled again. And you want to know why the president smiled. They're telling you that because probably something bad happened, right? So you have to resist the temptation of going for more pain, right? Let the drug go. We go to the withdrawal symptoms, right? And you're going to find some difficulty understanding how to go about replacing that thing that you had that was giving something to your life, even though it was something negative. And that's not an easy thing to do. You have to train yourself. Get out of the house if the weather is good. Take a walk. Go and play with the dog. Talk to your wife or your kids or your significant other. You know, do something that is different and start practicing it. If you find it difficult, well, do it 3 times a week, and the other 2 days you get into your pain situation, right? With your news and your opinion. But you need to understand that the news and the opinions in the news are not more important than you, and that you only control what you do. You don't control what they do, right? You don't control what they say. Okay. So we need to re-educate ourselves. I mean, it's become so prevalent that the news and the opinion that you get from the news has become like an only source of education.
Mm,
And that's pretty sad, right? Because it doesn't matter what you learn in school, it doesn't matter what you learn in history and geography, and humanities and all the stuff you did. It doesn't matter if for 5 seconds somebody gives an opinion and you forgot everything you knew.
mm. Turns into a belief system.
Exactly. Moves away from rationality into cult. And
And
that's a
those
pretty negative one.
little reminders you said, the things that pop up, it's really info baiting, right? To pull you back in.
Of course. Of course. I mean, now we have known this forever, right? I mean, advertising is based on baiting you so you can buy a product, right? We all fall into that. But it used to be that you had free will.
Mm,
What has happened with the new technologies is that some of these people who are doing the baiting know more about you than you know about yourself, right? So it used to be that they will show whatever goes to the wall and see what sticks, and maybe a percentage of people will buy. Now it's specifically targeted to your buying habits, to your watching habits, you know. So if people said, well, what about privacy? What about privacy? We gave up on privacy many, many, many years ago.
oh yeah.
So this idea that we are in control of privacy, no, we're in control of the buttons. We're in control of turning things off. We're in control of what we do, not what they do. But we need to understand that our knowledge of ourselves can give us options, but what other people know about us gives them options too.
Mm.
So it will, I mean, it continues to attack you in a lot of different directions. If I go into a site and look for a pair of pants, right, of certain type, I go to the next day on the computer and I get like 20,000 advertisement about those pants. How did that happen?
Oh
I mean,
heck, you can have a conversation now, and your phone picks up those things, and next thing you know, you have the metadata responding, and you're getting advertisements based on that.
correct. And somebody's making money out of that, right? So that's not healthy for us because we get into a point that opinion and technology are controlling our choices, you know? So I'm not terribly concerned about who's got my information, but I'm terribly concerned about being in control of my choices.
Mm. And that's
Right?
really the way to empower yourself. We've talked about this before. When aggression is being used against you, the best defense for that is being assertive. And really, this is a type of informational aggression or data aggression to
Correct.
manipulate you. So you being assertive, and part of that is setting boundaries, including what? Just turning the off button or turning down
Exactly.
or changing the channel.
Exactly.
And what are the
Uh,
other steps one could do beyond just separating yourself? What are the other steps people could do?
I really like the idea of people learning to practice mindfulness, which is a psychological technique. If that's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, and just you learn to meditate, basically. It's not magical, and it's like doing mindfulness is like going to the gym right now. People get very excited the first week,
And
and
then it
then
becomes a hassle.
exactly it becomes a problem. So people really need to get into more introspection, more understanding of themselves. And we've talked about this before too. We have to redefine our sense of purpose. Every time we make a decision about something or about a news or something, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this? Even if you want to follow a cult, what is the purpose of me following the cult? See, the cult in itself is not a purpose; it's a tool, right? So you really have to recognize what are you wanting to do with you, and you have to be balanced, in terms of how you negotiate you with the rest of the world. Because what has happened is that you end up being a mindless robot that is being manipulated, and then you get angry because of it, right? You start acting out because you allow somebody else to take control of your life. So I'm not saying that we should shame people who are mind controlled and manipulated, but we have to offer them an option. We have to offer them choices, right? And talking and communicating, I think, is the best way of dealing with this. The other thing is important with the news is that don't argue with people in your house about the news. If you want to have a good, deep seated discussion about a topic, make sure that you're not becoming the translator of the news for the rest of the family and that you're imposing your opinion on them. And then you get upset because they don't agree with you, right? So that's another area where I think is becoming terribly problematic. And it's not only with the news, but society in general, is that that's what universities were supposed to be built for, right? To universally discuss everything, right? Well, now there are just generators of opinions. And then you have one group of universities with one opinion, another group with another opinion, and nobody wants to listen to other people's opinions, right? Or ideas or plans. So there's a point in which somebody's going to have to stop and say, okay, how do we extend a hand, you know, to those who are trapped, okay, in the cult of opinion, you know? And we need to start by more education to people, especially younger people, about not falling into the trap of the cult of opinion, to be individuals with their own minds, their own affects, and their own defects, right? And their own wishes and hopes and plans, and their own control of their own lives, right? And we're losing that. That's what this the most, I think, the most scary part. And again, I see the worst of it because I get to see the LGBTQ kids who are committing suicide or attempting suicide. The autistic kids are problematic, the kids with anxiety. You know, that is an issue, right? That we need to not only help society be more understanding and empathic to the suffering of others, being more willing to extend a hand, and being more willing to accept differences, right? And I'm not talking about race, I'm not talking about gender, I'm just talking about any difference.
Differences of opinion and the like. But doesn't that start with the individual again recognizing that the fact that maybe in a cult of that sort, pulling themselves out of that, using their critical thinking skills, and then being open to new data, new information, in particular ones that challenge your current paradigm, but without being personally offended or angered by it.
The science of how do we convince other people that they're being irrational is interesting, but it's not an easy task, right? Um, because you have to, I mean, getting people out of the cultish behavior, and beliefs, it's a very lengthy process. And unfortunately, in the history of cults, something catastrophic has usually happened for people to start realizing, most young people don't remember Johnstown,
Mhm.
you know, where there was a massive homicide suicide thing going on, back in the day. People don't remember the 12 people. I don't think it was 12 people who killed themselves waiting for the
Yeah, in San
extraterrestrial
Diego.
in San
Yep.
Diego.
A Hale Bopp comet.
Exactly, exactly. So now this has, I mean, that those were unusual things at the time. Now we have a massive situation, right? So how do we go about extending our hand and our empathy and our ears to listen, right? Empathically. We don't have to agree, but we can hear and we can understand what other people come from, right? But everything has become based on the opinion news. You have to hate each other,
Mm.
you know. And I have always said I don't have to hate anybody because I can only hate the people that I have loved. You see, hate is a very passionate feeling, right? So for people to get into hating someone without having loved them is a lot of irrationality. Right? I mean, in my business, we don't talk about, you know, uh, societal delusions, right? Because we don't deal with society delusions, we deal with individuals. But the reality is that rationality needs to be the goal, and it has to be based on facts and not on ideas, right? And people have to be willing to respect rational facts, because if the only option to protect yourself is by getting deeper into the cult, that's not going to end that well for you. So again, the original question, what's in it for you? And some people will say, well, I feel safe in my bubble, and that is fine. I will respect that, but I would hope that they would respect me not being in the bubble. Right? And that's where problems become intense.
Yeah, it seems it's almost less than being into a cult. It's the animosity toward the other cults. Really, that's being fueled. And that you said that opposite of love and hate. That's where a lot of families now, based on those different belief systems, are giving into something very difficult. Instead of letting their love for one another and their feelings for one another transcend some of those differences.
Yeah, but you see, that's this is gonna sound offensive, but that's a very primitive, childish way of looking at the world.
Ah,
You know, is my dad's gun is bigger than your dad's gun.
mm-hmm.
Okay. So what? I mean, that's what kids do,
It is.
right? So my dad's stronger than your dad. Okay. So I don't want to have a conversation of strength, you know, but I do want to know, what is the purpose of you saying that? What are you hoping to accomplish by telling me that your dad's stronger than mine? What's in it for you? Intimidation, fear, you know, some people will say respect. That's childish, right?
So essentially, the news is bringing us back to a childlike state in our behaviors and responses to it.
Absolutely. It's the most regressive psychological process that you can think of.
So it sounds like we all need to step up, put our big boy pants on, and really know, all
Yes,
right, and really analyze what's going on. Be accepting of others people's opinions, being understanding if we are being sucked into that cult of information and opinion, and to basically stand as we're supposed to as individuals, and
absolutely.
have that the fortitude to do that, as well as the empathy to stand with others who may not completely agree with you.
Exactly. And again, this is not new. You know, we've seen this in religions fighting with each other for the last 10,000 years. I don't know. Right. I mean, it's the same process. It's just that it's on steroids now.
Well, it's universal. Everyone has access to the information,
Exactly.
as opposed to before when Gutenberg's Bible was the first start in disseminating information on a mass scale. Now it's almost unavoidable, the information. So dodging
Yeah.
those information bullets and the information war may be the first step. Again, empathy and
Yeah.
understanding, and
And
moving on.
before I go, sometimes you need to think of listening to opinion news as being close to a fire, right? And you had to think, I need to move myself away from that because I'm getting burned. So it's like a house on fire. So just pull back a little bit, look for the water, look for the cool stuff. Yeah. And the cool stuff may be closer than you think.
Yeah. So maybe the first piece of advice to the listeners out there, if you are feeling stressed and anxious about the news, is to take a little vacation. Uh,
Absolutely.
Turn off the devices. Don't
Yeah.
watch it. Give yourself 24 hours or however long. Stay away and be aware of how that's making you feel, how that's changing your behavior and your opinions and your feelings and how you're interacting with others. And just to be very conscious of that. And then if you're going to go back to it, take it in specific doses, again, like the drug, or stay away from it completely if it's going to make your life better.
Hey, a pleasure being with you. We'll see you again next week. We're going to have an interesting program next week. I hope that people will listen to it.
Yes, if we do this right, we're going to have a guest, one of our first guests to talk about, in particular, LGBT community, in particular, a gentleman who has a family that is has those issues in it, and how he approached that, being a pastor of the Christian faith, and how he decided to put love, as you say, or settle for love, or put love above everything, and then work the rest of it from that point of view. Once again, we appreciate you, Doctor, giving us your information. Everybody joining us live, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you again next week
See
on
you
the
next
Omega.
week.
Take care.
Okay.
We could really, all these